Hi everyone, how are we doing? Woo! Okay, so yeah, I'm Anne Buckley and I'm a lecturer in history at NUI Galway. And I just brought my little notes in case I completely mess up, but I'm optimistic. So when I told my mother that I was going to do this, she said to me, 10 years of college, 6 years as a lecturer, and now you're going to be a stand-up comic. And when I told my niece, who's 7 years of age, her only reaction was, you're going to be on YouTube before me? So, I don't know about people in this room, but I kind of stumbled into academia. I'm not from an academic family. I didn't really know what it meant. And I realized when you're in year 2 of the PhD and you don't know what PhD stands for, that's not a great thing. I honestly had to Google it after a guy asked me in the pub. But I love my job. I have amazing students. Some of them are here. Amazing colleagues. The only thing is that I study and I research slightly controversial areas. So I look at the history of women and children in Ireland, in modern Ireland. And because of that, I have come into some conflict at different times. So I'm just going to tell you about 2 events. The first was in France. I was at a conference and I was a PhD student, but luckily I knew what that meant. And I was giving a paper on the industrial school system in Ireland. And I was interrupted in the middle of the paper. And it wasn't by a French person, and it wasn't by any other nationality. It was the Irish representative from the Irish embassy. And he felt that I wasn't giving across a great view of Ireland. So I didn't really know how to react, but luckily, a very tall man, a tall man who had himself been on hunger strike in Northern Ireland for 53 days, decided to defend me because the conference was on reconciliation and victimhood. So everyone was really nice to me after that. The second time was at a more traditional summer school, and I wasn't even giving a paper on sex education, but I decided to comment at the end that maybe Ireland had been a bit deficient in its sex education. And yet I was attacked by a group of teachers at the end for underestimating them. And actually, I don't know if it was me looking back on my childhood or adult hormones, but I actually started crying. So those teachers made me cry. Okay, so that is my bad experiences, but luckily we're in the middle of the decade of commemorations, some of you might have heard, and it's been really good. There's been really good public appetite, and I've been going to a lot of venues, and people are really receptive. But when I was putting this together, I was thinking to myself, okay, here's a question. As a feminist socialist historian who's about to do her first stand-up comedy routine, I had to ask myself the following. When the first wave of suffragettes envisioned equality, and when the second wave argued for reproductive rights and gender equality, and particularly equal pay, did they think that a year before the centenary of suffrage, an Irish feminist socialist historian would be standing in a comedy club in Galway, commenting on the fact that neither have been fully achieved? Or, to repeat a well-worn line from last year, was that not what the men of the revolution were fighting for? So it's not really the historian's job to talk about repeal the eighth or gender pay gap, but I have to say that I do find with my students that being a bit political isn't so bad. And I have realised that in Ireland, history and politics are pretty much entrenched. And I'm sure that in the commemoration of the Civil War, everything will go just as well as the last few years. So one more commemorative story, I guess. I'm a historian of childhood. So my niece, again, gave me a bit of material here. Now, like a lot of other children in Ireland, she goes to a Catholic school. And like lots of other 7-year-olds last year, she was learning about the resurrection, about Jesus, about Easter week, as well as learning about Pádraig Pearse and a lot of the heroic 1916 rising leaders. So just to give an example, down in Cork, at the commemoration of Thomas Kent, who was executed, they, I think, had taught all the children the exact same thing. Because when RTE went and interviewed them on the day of the commemoration, all they said was, he had no boots on. That's all the children remembered. He had no boots on. So I really shouldn't have been that surprised when Ava showed me her painting. And in the middle of all the religious iconography, Jesus on the cross, there was Countess Markievicz and Thomas Kent without any boots on. So part of me is a bit concerned about this issue of, how we kind of use children and the state when we're commemorating. But it did make me think about a commemoration or an event in the 1930s. So there was a project, the National Folklore Collection, and it was really good. They kind of co-opted thousands of school children in Ireland, and they had them interview their relatives. And what they got them to do was ask them questions under a few headings. So some of them were local cures, local heroes, your favorite local saint, and one of my favorites, the Holy Family. So they wrote these amazing copybooks, and you can go on dukas.ie and you can check them all out. But I've often thought that we should maybe do this again, kind of an intergenerational exercise. And I started thinking to myself, okay, so we do this again. And obviously we replace the pens and the paper with the mobile phones and the internet. And what are we going to look at? What's going to be our topics? So I was trying to think, what are the defining moments in Irish history? What's the popular culture in the last 70 years? And I tried to avoid the negative stuff because I talk about that a lot. So I was thinking it's Italian 90, it's Ray Houghton, it's Riverdance, it's, all these great moments. Maybe it's Father Ted, maybe it's, there's all these cultural moments. And then I remembered a moment from my childhood. I was 11 years of age, it was 1995. And it was Sunday evening, and I had that moment, that kind of sick feeling you have when you have to go to school the next day. And I was sitting at home, and I think that moment, myself, my parents, all of Irish society was just shocked just for that moment. And I'm not sure if we've fully recovered when we saw Miley and Fidelma in the haystacks. Thank you very much.
Sarah Anne Buckley, everybody!